Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have Lynn Stark, employee at Taste of Tentera, but was paid at Taste of Slavery. Lynn needed money for her family. Lynn needed a home. Lynn needed to survive. She was desperate. Being just laid off from her job, she needed a solution. She needed it now. Switch sides. You have Cameron Awbrey, owner of Taste of Tentera, but a professional chef in the cuisine of slavery. Cameron had money. Cameron had ambition. Cameron knew what he needed to make the dream work, and he knew what he was going to do. He put an ad out in the city for a chef. Any chef. Someone who knew how to cook what he needed. You heard him say he received multiple replies to his ad. Stop texting me. Anyway. You heard him say that he received multiple replies for the job. Why didn't he hire an experienced chef, a professionally trained chef, or an American-born chef? The defendant knew that if he hired someone that wasn't desperate, they would not accept the conditions that Lynn Stark was forced to endure. Cameron needed someone he could manipulate. He needed someone weakened and emotionally battered by their circumstances. Then along comes our victim, Lynn Stark. Unqualified for the job, but qualified, the best choice for Cameron's needs. Julian Blake testified. Cameron told him that at his previous job, his boss got a lot of foreign workers to do very much for very little pay. And that was ultimately what Cameron had planned for Taste of Tentera. A foreign worker who would do a lot of work for very little pay. That's exactly what he got. How do we know this? First of all, Julian Blake was hired for his expertise in the restaurant business, but was not consulted whatsoever about hiring the most important employee at a restaurant, to be the person who cooks the food, the chef. When Julian Blake offered to put in his opinion, Cameron denied. Now in this case, there were plenty of paid servers. Not one, but more than one. There was only one chef. But Cameron claims he could not hire a second chef. Cameron knew that Lynn, inexperienced and unqualified, however, this made her the perfect victim to exploit. He even asked Lynn, would anyone in Little Tentera miss you if you were gone? Cameron verbally forced Lynn to work. As you've heard from Julian Blake, and Cameron, under oath, denied. Cameron threatened to have her deported if she didn't work hard. Being deported meant no money for her family. No money for her family ultimately meant the demise of her family, with her dying sister needing medical aid and her mother growing older and older every day. Only one person knew this as well as Lynn did. Cameron Awbrey. Cameron ignored the advice of his recommended hired consultant because he had other plans in store for our future victim. Under the guise of helping her, Cameron, by underpaying and overworking Lynn by even making her work on her only day off, gave her no choice but to accept his offer to live in the apartment above the restaurant, which eventually turned into her prison. You heard from Lynn herself, as well as other witnesses, that the windows had bars like a prison. Paint on the walls were peeling, the faucet was broken, the plumbing was bad, she had to wash her clothes in her sink. She had one tiny bed, one tiny desk, and the whole apartment smelled like milk. Despite being uninhabitable and unbearable, she forced herself to endure because she felt responsible for her dying sister and aging mother. It was no coincidence that Cameron hired Lynn, but to make it certain that she was his property for good, he confiscated her legal documents. He knew that without it, she couldn't go anywhere. He claimed that he needed it for employment purposes. But anyone who's ever had a legal job knows that employment paperwork takes 3 to 4 days, not 3 to 4 months. Lynn noticed this, and in the time that her sickly sister was reaching a fatal condition, Lynn pleaded for her paperwork so she could visit her family. Cameron responded in rage, as you've heard from their witnesses, as well as ours, that is no rare occasion. He went under oath in this courtroom and lied to everybody. Lynn did ask for her paperwork. How do we know if that's true? How could she see her sister without her passport? She went to Cameron Awbrey, asked for her passport, asked for her visa to go visit her dying sister, and Cameron Awbrey denied her, went on the stand, and denied that completely. And then to follow up, out of anger, Lynn dashes off to her room. Cameron slams her automatic locking door behind her, which would have been no problem if her key was where it was supposed to be. What you heard from their witness, Frankie Lyman, she saw Cameron Awbrey going into Lynn Stark's room when she was not there and coming out, claiming was to fix her faucet 3 months after she complained that the faucet was broken. He did not enter with any tools, and he did not exit with any tools. He waited until Lynn was hard at work to enter her room without knowledge and take her key. Lynn, out of patience and out of options, she knew this was getting out of hand. She knew that she had to do something before it got any worse. In the middle of one of her 19-hour shifts, she saw Officer Hayden West, a regular in the restaurant. Yet they had only shared a few polite and brief conversations. She knew he was a police officer. She knew he was her only hope of liberating herself. She wrote the note that you see here in Exhibit B, hid it from her slave master under the plate of food, and handed it to the officer. Lynn was saved that day. Saved from her 19-hour workdays, 7 days a week shifts. Saved from the man who had taken advantage of her weaknesses. Saved from the man who told the police officer willingly that everything under that roof belongs to him. And where we have shown in Exhibit A, Lynn lives right under that roof. And we have Addison Fry, the defense expert witness, not nearly as qualified as Mr. Dana Greyjoy, yet claims that Dana Greyjoy is wrong in his findings and the elements he obtained were not correct. We ask that you find the verdict guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Counsel.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. I stand before you today in defense of Cameron Awbrey, a hardworking, passionate, and caring American. The prosecution has fed you a story filled with nothing but misconceptions, lies, and insufficient proof for a conviction. They would have you demonize Cameron Awbrey, that he fed Lynn Stark a taste of slavery, but in reality, she was fed a taste of reality. And in that reality, Cameron Awbrey is just a bad boss and an experienced one at that, not a human trafficker. As any attorney can tell you, I'm sure Mr. Justice Noonan can also tell you, when you first work at your first job at a law firm, fresh out of law school, the managing attorney is almost always, for lack of a better word, abrasive. They yell, slam doors, throw things at you, and essentially treat you like a slave. Now we also have Lynn Stark, an immigrant from Tantera, with no professional training, a slacker in the workplace, and quite the chatterbox, as we heard from Officer Hayden West, an incompetent police officer at that, who is clearly incredibly biased against Cameron Awbrey, that he searched for any reason to arrest him and falsely did so. Now, a couple days later, he came into the restaurant and actually arrested Cameron Awbrey on the grounds of human trafficking, a subject of which he has virtually no experience with. He attended a day-long training course. That's it. It wasn't years of experience, or months, or even weeks. It was a day long ago when he was first hired. On the topic of incompetent witnesses, let's talk about Julian Blake. This man would have you believe that he had no power in removing the double-cylinder door, but in reality, he was in charge of remodeling the restaurant, while Cameron was in charge of hiring staff. In other words, he had final say in what goes and what does not go in that restaurant. Next, the prosecution would have you believe an incompetent expert who left out the most important factors in her assessment. They fed you a false narrative written by incompetent witnesses. The truth is that Cameron Awbrey is simply a misunderstood, stressed-out boss. His intention was to help someone who he saw that was in need, who was from a culture that he had deep ties to. And he came to see his family. He provided her with housing, food, and pay. He tried his best, giving her a comfortable life to be able to chase her American dream. He did the best he could for Lynn, even going so far as to trying to find a way to bring her family here to the United States of America. Oops. Last but not least, the damning piece of evidence that the prosecution wants you to ignore is that Lynn could have left any time she wanted. The terrible pay didn't chase her off, neither did the stressed-out boss, nor did the overwhelming fast work pace. Her documents are on top of Cameron's desk inside of the restaurant, unsecured, the same restaurant where Lynn lived above. At any time after hours when Cameron wasn't there, she could have easily grabbed them and searched for a better job. But she knew that Cameron was her best option to bring her family to America and pursue her American dream. For these reasons, the defense asks for a verdict of not guilty. The defense rests. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay, off record, a little about